The SEAL commander saw her cleaning the Barrett. 50. Then he discovered she held a 3,105-meter kill record. On the Spingar Ridge, 150 round thundered across the valley, taking 5 seconds to reach its mark. Minutes earlier, Commander Ryan Caldwell had noticed Sofia Ramirez's steady hands working the rifle like a surgeon. Her notebook revealed calculations of wind and mirage, proof of a hidden record shot no one else dared mention. Now a convoy's survival depended on trusting the soldier whose file had been erased. What transforms a dismissed marksman into the last wall between life and death? When the bullet flies, there is no pause, no second guess, only the truth of the shot. This is VeteranBiker. Comment 1 if you're new, 2 if you've been with us, 3 if you ride with us every week. Like, subscribe, and stay to the end. Commander Ryan Caldwell liked the silence of dawn on forward bases. The Spingar Mountains turned pale gold under the first light, and the air held that chill that reminded him of winter mornings back home. Most soldiers were still in their bunks, exhausted from patrols or waiting for the day's briefings. He used those hours to walk through the compounds, catching the state of things before official routines began. A commander could learn more from a quiet observation than from a stack of reports. That morning, something stopped him mid-stride. At the corner of the weapons maintenance shed, a figure was bent over a long steel frame spread across a table. He expected to see one of his own SEALs or an armor tech. Instead, it was an army staff sergeant he vaguely remembered from a roster, Sofia Ramirez. She was small compared to most in uniform, yet there was nothing hesitant in how she worked, each component of the massive Barrett. 50 lay in perfect sequence across the surface, gleaming with oil and dust. Her hands moved quickly but never rushed, fingers finding pins and springs as if the mechanism belonged to her alone. Sunlight angled through a gap in the corrugated roof, striking her face and the neat bun that kept her hair pulled back. Her expression showed no strain, only an almost meditative calm. Ryan slowed. He had seen plenty of soldiers clean rifles before. Most either treated the act like a chore or approached it with exaggerated reverence. Ramirez's method was neither. It was ritual and efficiency blended, a craftsman's rhythm. Beside her lay a small notebook filled with columns of numbers, wind directions and angles, every line marked with pencil as if she were plotting equations rather than maintenance notes. She must have felt his presence, because her eyes lifted briefly. Strikingly clear, with a kind of steadiness that came from hours behind a scope, they met his without flinch. She gave the faintest nod and went back to her task. "Mind if I watch?" he asked. Her voice came low, touched with a Texas drawl. "Free country, sir. No sarcasm, no deference beyond regulation, just simple confidence." Ryan leaned against a beam, watching as she slid the bolt assembly into place. The Barrett's sheer bulk made even his larger operators treat it with a degree of caution. Ramirez handled it as though it were an extension of her arm. Metal clicked together under her hands with the smooth certainty of practice, repeated 1,000 times. "How long have you been on that system?" Ryan asked casually. "Long enough," she replied, then, after a pause, started with the M24 at school, moved through upgrades. This one came before deployment. Her brevity carried weight. Ryan had learned that the quieter the marksman, the more likely the record spoke for itself. The ones who bragged rarely had much to show beyond training range scores. Another soldier came striding into the shed, young, brash, helmet tilted back too far. Private Miller, Ryan remembered. Barely out of his teens, eager to impress but often careless. He smirked at Ramirez. "Morning, Sergeant. Still playing with that cannon?" She didn't look up, tightening the optic mount with steady turns of her wrench. "Got to keep it clean. Never know when it'll be needed." Miller let out a laugh, the kind that tried to sound older than he was. "Yeah, well, maybe next time let the real snipers handle the long-range work." Ryan caught the faint tightening of Ramirez's jaw, though her hands never faltered. She set the wrench down, finally meeting Miller's gaze. "Experience," she said, tasting the word. "That's an interesting claim." Something in her tone made the private shift his weight. He looked away, muttering, and left without further comment. Ryan noted the slight curve of her lips afterward. Not amusement exactly, more the expression of someone who carried a truth others hadn't caught up with. Ryan found himself studying her again. The precision, the notebook, the quiet way she absorbed the jab without bristling. Each detail told him there was more here than an ordinary marksman. He had been briefed on personnel when his SEAL team arrived, but her name had been brushed past, overshadowed by a couple of louder reputations. That alone made him pay attention. The best talent often hid in plain sight, unadvertised. The rest of the base began to stir, generators humming, boots striking gravel, orders shouted across the yard. Yet in the shed the world seemed narrowed to one rifle and the woman piecing it back together. Ryan realized he had been standing there longer than intended. "You keep logs?" he asked, nodding at the notebook. Ramirez closed the cover with one hand. "Helps track variables. Conditions never stay the same twice." He appreciated the answer. Some soldiers relied on instinct, others on gear. The best blended both with discipline. As he left the shed, Ryan knew this meeting was not chance. Fate, or command, had just placed someone unusual in his path. Hours later, over a mug of bitter coffee in the command tent, he couldn't shake the image. The calm eyes, the scribbled notes, the rifle that looked oversized for her frame but fit her movements perfectly. He had questions building already. Where had she learned to treat a weapon like that? Why had the briefing given her only a passing mention? And why did he sense that before long the answers would matter to all of them? Radio chatter tore through the quiet of the Tactical Operations Center like a blade. Lieutenant Harris's voice came ragged, drowned at times by gunfire. Eagle 6, convoy pinned in the gorge, multiple shooters on the ridgeline, request immediate sniper cover. Commander Ryan Caldwell set down his mug, already moving toward the operations board. Maps of the Shamal Gorge lay unfolded, topographic lines curling like scars. The convoy's blue icon blinked between steep walls, red markers multiplying across the high ground. The situation was deteriorating by the second. Major Whitaker leaned over the console, barking for air support. 2 helicopters were inbound, but 15 minutes out, an eternity when ambushed on a narrow road hemmed in by rock. The convoy had wounded, their vehicles boxed by terrain, unable to maneuver without exposing themselves. Every man in the room knew, without immediate intervention, those minutes would turn fatal. A voice cut across the tension. "I can reach them," Sofia Ramirez said. She stood already kitted, rifle case slung across her back. Her expression was level, eyes locked on the map. "Observation post 2 clicks northwest. Elevation's good. I'll have angles." Whitaker frowned. "That's a long run in rough ground. Targets are extreme distance." Sofia didn't waver. "I know the ridges. 20 minutes to climb, 5 to set up. I can work them before they bury our people." Caldwell studied her face. No bravado, no hesitation, just clarity. He made the call. "Ramirez, go. Keep comms live. You miss clean. You pull back." She nodded once, already moving out the door. The screen tracked her beacon as it began its ascent toward the high spur overlooking the gorge. The command tent buzzed with tension. Whitaker muttered about betting lives on one soldier, but Caldwell shut it down with a glance. His gut said this woman carried experience far deeper than her paperwork revealed. Out on the slope, Sofia climbed steadily, burdened with gear that would have broken weaker bodies. Her breath came through the radio, in even intervals, controlled despite the incline. Each step crunched against scree, her silhouette weaving between outcrops. She spoke only when necessary, wind direction, distance remaining, time to position. Precision bled into her voice. The convoy's situation worsened. Enemy gunners on the cliffs raked the stalled vehicles, bullets sparking off armor plates. Harris's strained calls painted a picture of chaos. Tires shredded, men dragging wounded behind engine blocks, the canyon echoing with automatic fire. The distant thud of mortars added another layer of dread. Caldwell clenched his fists. The helicopters were still minutes away. All eyes shifted back to Sofia's signal inching up the slope. Overwatch 1 in position, her voice finally crackled. Static washed around the words, but the steadiness carried through. Setting tripod, ranging targets, binoculars lifted across the room. Even with optics, Caldwell could barely spot the dark speck that was her prone form against the stone. He imagined her world narrowed to crosshairs and numbers. Target 1, 900 plus meters, Sofia reported. Exposed shoulder firing angle downward, adjusting for crosswind, engaging. The command tent fell still. A thunderous crack rolled a moment later, reverberating through the gorge. Silence, then Harris's voice broke over comms, one shooter down. Fire eased on our left flank. Relief swept the room, but only briefly. Sofia was already shifting. Second nest, over 1,000. Rock cover partial. I see the muzzle. Engaging. Another shot, timed and measured. Seconds later, Harris shouted, another threat neutralized. Confidence surged among the convoy, but the battle was far from over. The enemy adapted, sliding into shadowed crevices, trying to mask their positions. Tracers still raked the canyon floor. Sofia tracked them with unerring calm. Her breathing stayed steady even when a mortar round impacted close to her perch, showering her with dust and stone fragments. Caldwell caught himself leaning forward, heart pounding, but her next words came smooth, still operational, adjusting position. The third round she fired rang different, longer pause, more calculation. 1,300 meters, shooter behind formation of boulders, mirage patterns shifting, accounting for thermals, shot out. The Barrett roared again. A heartbeat later, Harris's exultant tone, they're pulling back! Eastern slope is clear! The room erupted in relieved murmurs, but Caldwell raised a hand. Stay focused, they're not done. On the ground, Sofia scanned constantly, predicting moves before they happened. Through her scope, she saw fighters scrambling, trying to flank further north. She reported calmly, marking ranges and headings. The convoy began a slow withdrawal, dragging damaged vehicles while keeping pressure on their perimeters. Then Sofia's tone sharpened. Movement at Northern Ravine. Group maneuvering through choke point, armed, tactical spacing, range nearly 1,400. Whitaker's eyes widened. That's beyond standard effective range. Caldwell keyed his mic. Overwatch 1, can you disrupt them? Her reply carried no ego, only certainty. Affirmative, engaging now. The pause was longer this time. She had to lead moving silhouettes, predicting where they would be seconds ahead. When the shot came, its echo seemed endless. Moments later, target down, formation scattering. Harris confirmed in exhilarated bursts. They're breaking! Convoy moving out! Caldwell exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. Sofia's voice followed, calm as ever, observing withdrawal. No immediate threats. In 40 minutes she had turned the gorge from a trap into an escape route. Not with air support or artillery, but with patience, calculation, and steel nerves. Caldwell stared at the map, the blinking blue convoy icons crawling free, and knew this wasn't ordinary marksmanship. This was something rarer. He leaned back, whispering under his breath so only he could hear, "Who are you really, Ramirez?" The smell of cordite still clung to the air as Sofia Ramirez eased her cheek from the stock and swept the horizon through her spotting scope. The ridges across the gorge were quieter now, but not silent. The enemy had not given up. They were regrouping in unseen hollows, and she knew better than to assume otherwise. Her earpiece carried the rough breathing of Lieutenant Harris's men as they extracted wounded and coaxed crippled vehicles forward. Relief pulsed through their voices, but she heard exhaustion as well. This fight wasn't finished. Then came the dull thump of a mortar. The round whistled overhead and crashed into the slope less than 30 meters from her. Rock shards peppered her kit, a hot sting across the back of her neck. Dust clouded the scope for an instant. Instead of panic, her training snapped into place. She rolled off the position, dragging the rifle with her, sliding behind a protruding ledge. Her heart pounded, but her breath stayed controlled, the rhythm drilled by years of repetition. She keyed the mic, taking indirect fire, relocating. Caldwell's voice answered sharp but steady. "Copy. Prioritize survival. We still need your eyes." She knew that already. Crawling across uneven stone, she found a secondary perch slightly downslope, wedged between two boulders. It wasn't perfect. Her field of vision narrowed, but it kept her alive. She brushed grit from her optic, adjusted, and refocused on the ravine below. Through the glass she caught movement, figures hurrying along the cliff path, one hefting a tube, another mortar team. They intended to bracket her, force her to abandon the high ground. She had seconds. She calculated the drift of the wind at this new angle, the shimmer of heat rising from the stone. Then she squeezed the trigger, the Barrett thundered echo bouncing off the gorge walls, a body pitched sideways, the tube clattering against rock. The rest scattered. Mortar crew disrupted, she reported. Her voice sounded calmer than she felt. Down in the canyon, Harris came back over comms, the relief evident. Convoy continuing to move. "You're keeping them off us." But as Sofia shifted to track new arcs, another shot boomed from the opposite ridge. A sniper. Finally the enemy answered in kind. The round cracked against the rock face inches from her helmet. Pebbles showered her cheek. She drew in a breath, eyes narrowing. This was no random spray. Someone out there knew what they were doing. She crawled flatter against the stones, scanning through narrow gaps. A glint betrayed the rival shooter, tucked behind a jagged outcrop across nearly 1,200 meters of open space. He had height, but not patience. He had already fired and missed. Sofia adjusted elevation, exhaled slowly, and let the reticle settle. When she fired, her shot landed true. The opposing scope winked out, the figure slumping sideways. She reported it without triumph. Counter-sniper threat neutralized. In the command tent, Caldwell exchanged a look with Whitaker. He'd heard calm after kills before, but this was something else. Ramirez treated each shot as problem solved, nothing more. No boast, no quiver of adrenaline in her tone. That detachment unsettled him almost as much as it impressed. The fight dragged on. Enemy fighters shifted to guerrilla tactics, harassing from distance, fading back into ravines. Sofia tracked them relentlessly, feeding coordinates to the convoy and command center. At one point she warned of movement along a goat trail, allowing Harris's men to swing their guns before the ambushers even raised rifles. At another she described dust rising on the far slope, predicting another flank attempt that never had a chance to unfold under her watch. Then came the most dangerous moment yet. As the convoy limped toward the extraction point, Sofia caught sight of a squad of insurgents sprinting toward a collapsed stone wall that overlooked the path. If they set up there, they would have commanding fire on the retreating vehicles. The distance was brutal, nearly 1,500 meters at an awkward angle. She would have to shift to a prone that exposed her side. She whispered to herself, not prayer but calculation. Wind steady from the west, mirage pushing left, angle steep, bullet drop severe. She anchored the rifle, pressed her cheek against the stock, and held still. Her finger tightened. The blast shook her bones. Through the scope she saw the lead fighter fall hard, the group's momentum broken. The rest faltered, then vanished into gullies. The convoy crept past the danger zone. Caldwell's voice broke the silence. Ramirez, status, operational, remaining ammo sufficient, convoy clear of immediate threat. The commander's hand tightened on the radio. He couldn't ignore it anymore. Whoever this staff sergeant was, she carried skills far beyond the neat lines of her file. He pictured her alone on that ridge, surviving mortars, outdueling another sniper, calculating shots that most would call impossible, and all delivered with clinical calm. Questions pounded his mind, but he pushed them aside. There would be time later. For now, the priority was getting the convoy out alive. When the helicopters finally thundered overhead, the sound drowned out the last enemy resistance. Dust plumed as the Apaches strafed ridgelines, driving survivors to scatter. The convoy began its final crawl out of the gorge, wounded loaded, engines groaning. Harris reported with gratitude thick in his voice, "We're moving free. Overwatch saved our skins." Caldwell didn't respond immediately. He stood at the map table, eyes locked on the blinking signal of Sofia's beacon. She had not only provided cover, she had shifted the entire tempo of the battle. Without her, Shamal Gorge would have been a killing field. With her, it became a passage to survival. But even as relief coursed through the operations center, Caldwell's mind stayed sharp. He had seen glimpses of her ability now, the precise handling of her weapon, the resilience under direct threat, the ability to anticipate moves before they happened. Those were not traits built from a few months of sniper school. They were born of something deeper, something hidden. He resolved to find out what. On her ridge, Sofia finally allowed herself a moment. She lowered the rifle, flexed stiff hands, and let the silence settle. The gorge below was scarred with smoke, but quieter. She swallowed against the dust in her throat, then packed her gear with the same order she had shown that morning in the maintenance shed. Each piece back in place, each movement unhurried, despite the tremor of fatigue that tugged at her shoulders. She tapped the mic once more. Overwatch extracting. Will await escort before returning to base. Caldwell exhaled, shoulders loosening for the first time since the first call of ambush, but his mind didn't relax. Instead, it sharpened with intent. He had a soldier to question, a mystery to unravel, and if his instincts were right, the answers would alter not only his mission but the way he measured skill itself. The gorge battle was won, but something larger had just begun. The roar of rotor blades was still echoing off the cliffs when the first vehicles of the convoy rolled into the relative safety beyond Shamal Gorge. Dust clouds swirled around dented armor, splintered windows, and the weary faces of men who had survived hours of fire. Wounded soldiers were lifted carefully into waiting medevac birds, their cries muffled by engine noise. Relief mingled with exhaustion, and though no one said it out loud, all understood that one marksman on a ridge had shifted their fate. Commander Ryan Caldwell remained at the command table, absorbing the after-action reports. Each voice over the net carried gratitude, but he noticed how often they repeated one name, Overwatch 1. His gaze kept straying to the blinking signal on the map that showed Sofia Ramirez holding her perch. He had ordered her to remain until the helicopters secured the corridor, and even now she had not moved without clearance. Discipline like that spoke louder than commendations. When the last of the convoy cleared, Caldwell finally gave the order for her to withdraw. She confirmed simply, then began the descent, her beacon tracing slow arcs down treacherous paths. Hours later, as the base settled into the uneasy calm that follows combat, he watched her step back into the perimeter. Her uniform was streaked with dust, eyes red-rimmed from wind and grit, but her posture stayed upright. She moved straight to the weapons shed, setting the Barrett on the bench as if it were another day's chore. Caldwell intercepted her there. "Staff Sergeant," he said, voice low enough not to carry, "you just turned a slaughter into a retreat. You saved Harris and his people. How do you want that recognized?" She met his gaze without blinking. "Sir, I did my job. It wasn't dismissal, nor false modesty. It was plain fact, spoken as though no other explanation was necessary." Caldwell studied her for a moment, then nodded. Still, the questions in his mind grew heavier. The following morning, the operations center smelled of burned coffee and stale sweat. Debriefing reports littered the tables. Harris himself limped in, bandaged and tired, to offer thanks. He spoke not of his own actions, but of the unseen rifle that had blunted the ambush. "We heard her shots before we saw the dust clear. That sound kept us moving." Whitaker raised an eyebrow at Caldwell after Harris left. "You know, Commander, we don't put convoys in the hands of Army Staff Sergeants as a rule. She's good, I'll grant, but what you're suggesting, that's Special Operations territory." Caldwell's jaw tightened. "What I'm suggesting is that her skills don't match the file, and I intend to find out why." Later that day, he walked the base alone, boots crunching over gravel. Soldiers nodded, some saluted, but he was looking for one figure. He found her seated outside the barracks, rifle broken down again, cloth in hand. She looked up, eyes tired but steady. "Permission to speak freely?" he asked. She gave the smallest shrug. "Always, sir. You faced mortars, a rival sniper, and a gorge full of rifles. You calculated shots most men wouldn't attempt. Where does that come from?" Her hands paused on the bolt carrier. "Training. Practice. Necessity." He leaned against the rail. "I've worked with plenty of schoolhouse graduates. What I saw yesterday wasn't just training. You were reading the field like you'd lived in those mountains for years." She said nothing, setting the part aside with precision. The silence stretched until finally she spoke again. "Some things aren't in the paperwork." Caldwell caught the edge in her tone, final, warning, but it only confirmed his suspicion that she carried a history he hadn't been briefed on. That evening, when reports were filed and the base had quieted, he found himself replaying the radio traffic in his mind, her calm under fire, the matter-of-fact confirmations after each shot, the refusal to elaborate when others might have sought praise. He had led men through impossible battles, but few individuals left him unsettled in this way. Ramirez did, and he needed to know why. The next day brought orders for another patrol, though this one was less contested. The valley remained dangerous, but the enemy had been shaken. Harris's unit prepared to roll again, and Sofia was assigned Overwatch once more. Caldwell observed from a distance as she packed her gear. She adjusted straps, checked optics, and logged details in her notebook with the same diligence he had glimpsed days earlier. Each mark was a record of wind, terrain, and range, a ledger of survival. When the convoy returned without incident, Caldwell made his move. He sought out Colonel Karen Doyle, the base commander. In her office, lit by a single lamp, he spread the personnel file across the desk. "Colonel, with respect, this doesn't add up. Ramirez doesn't fight like someone fresh from sniper school. She fights like someone who's been deep in classified operations." Doyle folded her arms. "Careful, Commander. Files are what they are for a reason." He met her eyes. If she hadn't been on that ridge, Harris would be dead. "I need to know who I'm working with." "I don't think you do either." The colonel's silence was telling. After a long pause, she sighed. "Some records are sanitized before reassignment. I can't discuss what's beneath. But you're right, she is more than her file." That half answer gnawed at him. He left the office with more questions than before. Yet as he stepped into the cool night air, he knew one truth: Sofia Ramirez was no ordinary marksman. And until he uncovered the reality of her background, every mission they ran would carry both the promise of brilliance and the risk of secrets untold. For now he could only watch, wait, and prepare, because sooner or later the battlefield would force her past to the surface, and when it did, Caldwell intended to be ready. The sense of reprieve after Shamal Gorge lasted only days. Patrols returned with stories of enemy fighters slipping back into the hills, hauling heavy weapons, preparing for something larger. Intelligence hinted that the insurgents intended to reclaim initiative with a second strike, timed for when the Americans felt safest. Caldwell had seen it before: draw the enemy into believing the fight was over, then hit them at the choke point they couldn't avoid. The choke point in this case was the stone bridge that spanned a deep ravine west of the valley. Every convoy leaving the sector had to cross it. Its arches dated back centuries, a relic turned lifeline, and whoever controlled the ridges above commanded the passage. Caldwell studied the maps at night, tracing possible approaches, feeling the weight of inevitability. The enemy would stage there, and when they did, Harris's battered unit would be caught again. Orders came quick: another resupply run. Harris protested, but supplies had to move. The base couldn't function otherwise. Trucks were loaded with fuel, rations, and spare parts. Armor was patched, but scars of the last ambush still marked steel and men alike. There was no time for complete repairs. Caldwell paced behind the planning table. "They'll wait at the bridge," he told Whitaker. "Count on it. If they hold those heights, it's a slaughter ground." Whitaker nodded reluctantly. "Air cover is stretched thin. We can get birds overhead, but not until they're already in contact." That left one answer: Ramirez. She sat quietly at the far end, listening without interruption. When Caldwell turned to her, she spoke before he asked. "I'll move early. Take position above the western ridge. If they set up, I'll disrupt before they're ready." Whitaker grimaced. "That's nearly 2 kilometers. You'll be pushing the rifles' outer limits." Her reply was flat, unshaken. "It's possible. I just need time." Caldwell gave the order. "Go." The morning of the convoy's departure, the air tasted of dust. Engines rumbled as trucks lined up. Soldiers checked weapons with mechanical motions, aware of what waited ahead but saying little. Harris climbed into his lead vehicle, jaw clenched tight. Caldwell watched the column roll out, then shifted to the operations center, eyes fixed on the screen tracking Ramirez's beacon. She moved fast across broken ground, climbing toward a spur that offered view of the bridge. The climb was brutal, shale slipping underfoot, weight dragging at her shoulders. She kept her breathing steady, counting steps, measuring distance against time. Sweat soaked her back, but she pressed upward, driven less by orders than by certainty of what would come. When she reached the crest, she lay flat, scanning through binoculars. The bridge lay below, a pale line over shadowed depths, and beyond, movement, shapes threading through gullies, carrying weapons broken down for transport. She whispered into the radio, multiple contacts west approach. Heavy gear, setting up firing points. Caldwell's gut tightened. The enemy had chosen well. Machine guns, maybe rockets, aimed straight at the crossing. The convoy was minutes away. "Overwatch 1 assessment?" he asked. "They'll control the bridge in 10 minutes. I'm 1-8 out. Atmospherics unstable. I can't promise clean kills, but I can slow them." "Do it," Caldwell ordered. "The convoy can't halt. They're too exposed." Sofia anchored her rifle, adjusting bipod legs against uneven stone. She checked her notebook, cross-referenced with what she saw through the scope. Mirage shimmered upward, distorting outlines. Wind swirled unpredictably through the canyon. She steadied herself, aligning calculations with instinct. The first shot cracked, echoing through the mountains. It struck short, kicking dust meters from the target. Enemy fighters froze, confusion flashing across their ranks. They hadn't expected fire from so far. Sofia adjusted, corrected for wind shift, and fired again. This time the round smashed into the rock beside a crew assembling a machine gun, sending them scrambling. On the operations board, Caldwell traced the enemy icons. She's buying them time. Down on the road, Harris shouted into comms, crossing in 2 minutes. Keep them pinned! Sofia fired again and again, each round hammering the ridges, disrupting formations, never letting the ambushes settle. The sound of the Barrett rolled endlessly across the canyon, a storm of thunder that kept the enemy guessing. They ducked, shifted, tried to return fire, but their bullets struck wide, unable to find her hidden perch. Then came the moment Caldwell had dreaded. Grant lost drone feed, Whitaker reported. Signal interference. She's on her own. Caldwell slammed a fist on the table. Now every call, every adjustment rested on Ramirez's judgment alone. He keyed the mic. Overwatch 1, you're blind on support. Do what you have to. Understood, came her reply, steady as ever. Through her scope, Sofia saw enemy fighters rushing to establish overlapping fire lanes. She couldn't hit them all, but she could create fear. She shifted targets rapidly, one round after another, never staying fixed. Stone shattered, dust geysered, bodies stumbled. Confusion rippled. The enemy thought a platoon of snipers had them under fire. Below, the convoy reached the bridge. Tires clattered over stone. Engines groaned under strain. Harris's voice was harsh, clipped. We're halfway across. Keep them off us. Sofia gritted her teeth, aligning another shot. The bullet leapt, trailing shockwave. Through the scope she watched another crew scatter, abandoning their heavy weapon. She rolled her shoulders to ease the ache, chambered again, fired. Every second counted, every shot shaved risk. Caldwell's knuckles whitened on the table edge. He listened to her measured breathing over comms, each exhale followed by a thunderclap in the gorge. It was rhythm. It was defiance. She was dragging an entire battle through sheer will. Finally, Harris shouted, "We're clear! All vehicles across!" Cheers broke in the background, raw and exhausted. Sofia lay still, scanning for pursuit. She saw fighters retreating into the ridges, unwilling to chase further under her gaze. She whispered into the mic, "Bridge secure, enemy withdrawing." Caldwell let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd held. Around him, men sagged with relief. Yet the commander's eyes stayed on her beacon. She had done more than hold the line. She had waged a one-woman campaign of disruption that outmatched entire squads. As the convoy rumbled back toward base, Caldwell knew something had shifted again. Her precision under impossible conditions, her poise when technology failed, her refusal to break. It was no longer a question of chance skill. He would get answers. The bridge had been crossed, but a greater revelation was looming, and he intended to meet it head-on. The base returned to its routine after the convoy made it back intact, but the air around the compound was charged with unspoken tension. Soldiers swapped stories about the bridge crossing, their accounts threaded with awe for the unseen guardian on the ridgeline. For many, Ramirez was no longer just another staff sergeant. She was a mystery who had prevented disaster twice in a row. The nickname, the Ghost on the Rocks, spread in murmurs across the barracks. Ryan Caldwell noticed the change in tone every time her name surfaced. Soldiers who had once brushed past her now spoke with reverence, though Sofia herself did nothing to encourage it. She kept to her routine, cleaning weapons, checking logs, training at the range when time allowed. If anything, she seemed more withdrawn, her expression unreadable, her focus deeper. Caldwell couldn't shake the sense that every action of hers carried layers. He needed clarity, not curiosity, not suspicion, understanding. Because he was about to request her on missions beyond the scope of ordinary Overwatch, and he had to know what foundation she stood on. That evening he walked into Colonel Karen Doyle's office, the room smelling faintly of dust and old paper. The colonel was already reviewing casualty reports. Without preamble, Caldwell spread Ramirez's file across the desk. "Colonel, this record is incomplete, and we both know it. Her performance doesn't match the profile. Where's the missing history?" Doyle's eyes lifted, steady and sharp. "Commander, I suggest you tread carefully. Personnel files are sealed at levels even I don't pry into." Caldwell leaned forward. "I'm not asking for gossip. I'm asking because I'm trusting her with operations that decide whether men live or die. I need to know if the person on that ridge is who she says she is, or if she's something else entirely." For a long moment Doyle said nothing. The low hum of the generator outside filled the silence. Finally she opened a drawer and withdrew a thin envelope. Inside was a single document, a letter marked with CIA letterhead. It wasn't meant to be there. Its signature line bore initials Caldwell didn't recognize, but the words were unmistakable, a commendation for precision support during sensitive operations. He read quickly, his throat tightening. This was never supposed to stay in her file. "Correct," Doyle replied. "But clerical errors happen. That's all I can give you. The rest, if you want it, you'll need to hear from her directly." Caldwell nodded once, tucked the letter back and left. The proof was small, but it confirmed what he already suspected. Ramirez's official history was only the surface. He found her later that night, seated alone at the firing range under dim floodlights. The sound of distant laughter from the barracks contrasted with the solitude where she sat, rifle across her knees, eyes scanning darkness as though watching for ghosts. He approached without haste. "Staff Sergeant." She glanced at him, then back at the horizon. "Sir, I read something tonight that raises more questions than answers." Her jaw tightened. "Then maybe you shouldn't have read it." He didn't flinch. "Maybe. But you left me no choice. You've shown skill that doesn't come from standard courses. Men are alive because of you, and I intend to keep them alive again. But if I'm going to place you in positions where the entire mission rests on your trigger, I need to know what you've carried into this fight." For the first time since he'd met her, she seemed to weigh her words heavily. She set the rifle aside, leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "What do you want to know?" "Everything that isn't here." He tapped the patch on her shoulder, the part hidden behind classifications. Silence stretched. Then she spoke, voice even, almost clinical. "Before this unit, I wasn't on routine patrols. I was attached to a joint task force operating out of Bagram. Special access, missions without names. They called it Task Force Shadow." Caldwell didn't react outwardly, though the name carried weight. He'd heard rumors of Shadow, operators drawn from across branches, working in the dark corners where official reports never went. "What was your role?" "Precision elimination, counter-sniper, long-range reconnaissance." "We hunted commanders who thought distance and mountains made them untouchable. My job was to prove them wrong." Her words lacked embellishment, no drama, just a blunt account of what she had done. Caldwell asked quietly, "How many?" 40 plus confirmed, she answered after a pause. "Most beyond 800, a third over 1,500. He let out a slow breath. Numbers mattered less than the weight behind them. She continued before he spoke. "One in particular, over 3,000. Target was orchestrating raids from a compound no unit could reach. Intel gave me one chance. I took it." Caldwell remembered the Convoy reports, her matter-of-fact tone when asked about extreme ranges. Now the truth aligned. "Why isn't that here?" He gestured as if to the invisible file. "Why erase what you did?" "Because men like me don't exist on paper when programs shut down. They scrub details. They return us to the line like nothing happened. Easier to deny than acknowledge." Her tone held no resentment, only acceptance. She leaned back. I didn't come here for recognition. I came here because I needed distance from that world. Task Force Shadow ate people alive. You give everything and it keeps asking for more. I thought maybe if I went back to regular service, I could still contribute without burning out. Caldwell studied her face. No arrogance, no false modesty, just the calm of someone who had walked through shadows and returned altered. He said finally, and now I see the fight doesn't care where you came from. Those men on the convoy, they needed someone in that moment. That's what matters. They sat in silence a long time, the sound of distant generators filling the air. Caldwell realized he had his answer. She wasn't hiding because she wanted to deceive. She was hiding because the truth was heavy, and carrying it every day was enough. He rose. I appreciate the honesty. You've given me what I need. Just know this. If you run with my team, we'll treat you for what you are, not what the file claims. Sofia looked up at him. For the first time there was a flicker of weariness in her expression, the mask slipping. Understood, sir. As Caldwell walked back toward the barracks, he knew the future of their operations had shifted. Ramirez wasn't just a capable sniper, she was forged from the hardest missions their war had produced. And though she sought anonymity, fate was pulling her back toward the crucible. That night, as the base quieted, Caldwell reviewed mission schedules. Upcoming tasks required surgical precision, and he knew exactly who he wanted by his side. But a thought gnawed at him. Secrets had a way of surfacing when least convenient, and Sofia Ramirez's past was not done echoing into the present. The truth about Task Force Shadow hung in the air long after Sofia Ramirez had left the range that night. Caldwell lay awake in his bunk, the whir of the generator outside serving as a poor substitute for sleep. He kept replaying her admission. Those hidden missions. The tally of lives ended at ranges most would never dare attempt. More than the numbers. It was the cold steadiness in her voice that stayed with him. She wasn't boasting, she was remembering, carrying weight she had no need to display. That calm was both reassuring and haunting. At dawn he gathered his team. They were planning the next phase of operations in the Spingar sector, where insurgent leadership had begun to cluster. The mission required infiltration across jagged ridges, with Overwatch on multiple routes. Caldwell watched his SEALs sharpen knives, adjust optics, trade jokes to mask nerves. He thought of Ramirez, sitting apart, quietly prepping her weapon as though detachment were armor. She had become central to their calculations, though officially she remained an outsider. That changed when Doyle gave tacit approval. You'll have her support on a trial basis, the colonel told him. Temporary attachment if she agrees. Sofia didn't answer right away when Caldwell offered. She stood in the shade, helmet tucked under one arm. Going back into that tempo means opening doors I'd closed, she said finally. But if it saves lives, I'll do it. The first joint mission began at dusk. They hiked in silence, boots sinking into loose shale, radios hushed. The Spingar peaks loomed, jagged teeth against the fading sky. Sofia moved near the rear, but her eyes scanned constantly, reading terrain as though each ridge whispered secrets. When they established their forward position, she settled on a plateau with clear sight lines across two valleys. She needed no direction. She was already ranging targets, logging distances in her small notebook. Hours passed with only the sigh of wind. Then a convoy of insurgent trucks appeared far below, headlights muted. Fighters spilled out, moving toward a cave complex. Through her scope, Sofia saw the outlines of weapons crates. She murmured ranges into comms, each number crisp, each calculation feeding Caldwell's plan. The SEALs launched their assault in tandem, storming the caves while her rounds cracked overhead, silencing lookouts before they could sound alarms. Afterward, When the team exfiltrated under cover of night, one of Caldwell's men, Petty Officer Grant, muttered in awe, "It's like she sees 3 steps ahead of everyone else." But Caldwell noticed more than her precision. He saw how she carried herself after each engagement, efficient, detached, as though she refused to let emotion catch up. The others celebrated small victories, traded grins, slapped shoulders. Ramirez simply logged notes and cleaned her weapon, the ritual her anchor. Days later, another operation pushed them deeper into hostile ground. Intelligence pointed to a gathering of mid-level commanders coordinating ambushes. The route was a gauntlet, narrow switchbacks, cliffs yawning on either side. Caldwell's men tensed, but Sofia seemed carved from stone, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Halfway through the approach, enemy fire erupted from concealed ridges. The SEALs hit the ground, returning bursts, but the ambushers had height and numbers. Sofia crawled to a ledge, sighted, and began dismantling the ambush one shot at a time. The sound of her rifle cracked across the canyon, echoing like thunder. She neutralized threats in methodical rhythm, shifting angles before counterfire could track her. Caldwell maneuvered his men forward under her cover, each movement timed to a cadence. When they reached the objective, the caves were abandoned, too quiet. Caldwell's gut twisted. The fighters had anticipated them. As if on cue, another wave erupted from the cliffs above, cutting off retreat. In the chaos, Sofia's calm voice cut through comms. "Secondary force, upper ridge, 20+. They're trying to box you." Caldwell cursed, then snapped orders. They shifted formation, returning fire upward. Sofia fired relentlessly, striking down gunners who leaned too far, breaking momentum. But this wasn't about kills. It was about disrupting rhythm, giving the SEALs a gap to break free. Every shot was placed to scatter rather than simply eliminate. Finally, under her cover, Caldwell's team punched through and escaped down a dry riverbed. The pursuit faltered, unwilling to chase into terrain Ramirez commanded from above. They linked up at extraction, lungs burning, adrenaline spiking. Grant slapped his helmet, exclaiming, "She just saved the whole squad!" Caldwell didn't argue. He looked at Sofia, who was already wiping down her barrel, her expression unreadable. It was becoming clear she wasn't just support, she was shaping battles. Back at base, whispers turned louder. Soldiers began asking who she really was, passing stories of impossible shots, of insurgents routed by a single figure they never saw. Caldwell heard the talk, saw the shift in how troops treated her, deference replacing doubt. He knew the legend was outpacing the woman, and that made him uneasy. Legends drew attention, and attention could destroy someone who thrived in silence. One evening he found her alone by the wire, looking out toward the dark ridges. "You carried us today," he said. She shook her head. "I carried a rifle, you carried the men." But he pressed. "Those ambushers were ready for us. You spotted their play before it unfolded. That isn't luck. That's experience, hard, bloody experience. How many times have you done this?" Her shoulders tensed, enough to know it never gets easier. Caldwell fell quiet. He realized she carried ghosts with her, not just skill. Each calm shot masked a ledger of memory she'd rather not open. Still, the pattern was clear. With every mission, her influence deepened. The SEALs trusted her judgment implicitly, timing movements to her calls as though she had been with them for years. Caldwell watched and understood. Ramirez wasn't merely part of the fight. She was rewriting how they fought. But shadows don't stay buried. Caldwell knew command channels would start asking questions when results kept tying back to one name. And when scrutiny came, so would risk, not just to Sofia, but to every operation she touched. The missions continued. each one more demanding than the last, but Caldwell carried a growing unease. He admired her brilliance, relied on her instincts, but he also saw the toll. Her eyes grew darker, her silences longer. She carried weight without complaint, but even steel bends eventually. The war wasn't done with her, and neither were the secrets she carried. Caldwell resolved that before the next great test, he would find a way to shield her from the very system that had built, used, and discarded her. Because if he didn't, the past she'd revealed might consume the present, and they would all pay the price. The mountains did not rest, and neither did command. Within days of the ambush that Sofia Ramirez had disrupted, new intelligence surfaced. A senior insurgent figure was expected to convene with lieutenants in a fortified compound deep within the Coral Valley. The target was responsible for coordinating attacks across the eastern provinces, directing raids that had cost lives on both sides. Eliminating him would shift momentum, but the distance and defenses made the mission nearly impossible. In the command tent, maps littered the table. Caldwell leaned over them, finger-tracing routes along jagged contours. "The compound sits here," he said, tapping the spot where ridge lines folded into a bowl. "Only one observation point gives line of sight. 3,000+ meters out." Whitaker grunted. "That's a fantasy shot. No one takes that kind of risk." But Caldwell's eyes shifted to Sofia. She sat quietly, studying the maps, her expression unchanged. When she finally spoke, her tone was measured. "It's not fantasy. It's math. Wind, pressure, humidity. If those align, it can be done. But I'll need time to set up and the right ammunition." The colonel looked skeptical. "Even if you can line it up, the target won't stay exposed. You'll have seconds, maybe less." Sofia nodded. "That's enough." Caldwell saw the weight of her words settle over the table. They all knew she had walked this path before. She didn't argue, didn't boast, she simply stated what she could deliver. Orders were issued. The SEAL team would infiltrate to secure a perch on a ridge overlooking the compound. Sofia would carry the Barrett, modified with custom optics and hand-selected ammunition. The shot, if possible, would be the longest attempted in any of their careers. Preparation consumed the next 3 days. Sofia spent hours inspecting each round, rejecting any that showed even minor flaws. She adjusted her scope repeatedly, running checks against atmospheric sensors. Caldwell noticed her intensity. It was ritual, but also something deeper. This wasn't just a mission, it was the culmination of everything she carried from the shadows. The night before departure, Caldwell found her in the shed, wiping down the weapon one last time. "You ready?" he asked. Her eyes flicked up. "I'm ready for the shot. Whether conditions allow it, that's beyond me." He respected her honesty. No illusions, no false confidence. "We'll do our part to get you the window." Dawn broke cold as they moved out. The team climbed for hours, following goat tracks and dry stream beds until they reached the ridge. From their position, the compound looked like a toy village far below, tiny figures moving between courtyards. Even through binoculars, it seemed impossibly distant. The idea of threading a bullet across that gulf of air felt like aiming at a dream. Sofia settled into place. She laid out her notebook, marked fresh entries for barometric pressure and wind shifts. Her breathing slowed, steadying as she adjusted bipod legs into the stone. She whispered to Caldwell, 3,700 and change. Flight time about 5 seconds. He absorbed the number, the enormity of it. 5 seconds in which anything could happen. Wind gusts, a step in the wrong direction, a shift of posture. Yet her tone remained clinical, like she was describing a recipe. Hours passed as they waited. The compound bustled with guards, couriers, and fighters, but the target had not appeared. Patience was part of the mission. Caldwell lay beside her, watching through his spotting scope, feeling tension coil tighter with each passing minute. Finally, near midday, movement stirred the compound. A cluster of men emerged from a building, the central figure taller, dressed differently. Surveillance drones confirmed the target. He walked toward the courtyard, flanked by bodyguards. Time slowed. Sofia's voice dropped to a whisper. Range confirmed. Wind variable from northwest, 8 to 10. Mirage steady. He'll pause in the open. Caldwell steadied his scope, heart hammering. He had absolute trust, but even trust didn't quiet the enormity of what she was attempting. The target stopped at the courtyard center, gesturing to his aides. Sofia's body went utterly still. She exhaled once, gently, and squeezed. The rifle's concussion shook the ridge. Caldwell began to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Through the scope, the target collapsed, a figure crumpling in the dust. Guards shouted, chaos erupted. Caldwell blinked, stunned. The impossible had happened. Impact confirmed, Sofia said softly, her tone unchanged. Target down. The team moved fast, packing gear, preparing to exfil. Helicopters wouldn't reach them for hours, and enemy fighters would comb the area once they realized the shot came from above. But Sofia remained calm, already logging her notes, marking details even as her hands showed the faint tremor of adrenaline. During exfiltration, they threaded through ravines, evading search patrols. Twice they froze as fighters passed within meters, but Sofia showed no fear, her eyes scanning, always alert. When they finally reached extraction, the team was exhausted, but the mood was electric. They had witnessed something historic, though none would speak of it openly. Back at base, whispers ignited like wildfire. Men spoke of a shot across nearly 4 kilometers, a kill at the edge of imagination. Caldwell watched as rumors spread, each retelling stretching details, but the essence remained: one woman, one rifle, one impossible strike. Colonel Doyle summoned Caldwell to her office. She looked grim. Do you realize what this means? Verification will come. Command will want reports, recordings, everything. Once it's confirmed, she won't stay invisible. Caldwell knew. Records brought recognition, and recognition brought scrutiny. Sofia had survived by staying in the shadows. This shot would drag her into light she didn't want. He found her in the maintenance shed again, alone with the rifle. You know what's coming, he said quietly. She didn't look up. Fame isn't armor, it's a target. But the man I shot today won't orchestrate another raid. That's what matters. Caldwell respected the conviction, but he also understood the storm ahead. He'd seen how bureaucracy consumed people who achieved too much. Sofia Ramirez had stepped beyond the boundary of legend, and legends drew attention. As the base settled into uneasy celebration, Caldwell realized the real battle had shifted. It was no longer only about mountains and ridges. It was about protecting a soldier who had given everything, even when the cost was her anonymity. And deep inside, he knew the war wasn't finished with her. The shot had changed everything: strategy, morale, the balance of power. But it had also changed Sofia. For the first time, he saw her eyes linger on the horizon, as though she knew her path forward would be defined, not by what she wanted, but by what history demanded. The Coral Valley mission rewrote the air in the base, as if every soldier breathed differently. The corridors buzzed with rumors, each story reshaping what had happened on that ridge. Some said Sofia Ramirez had hit the target with her eyes closed. Others whispered about experimental ammunition. Others still swore there had been multiple shooters. Caldwell ignored the noise. He knew what was true: one rifle, one operator, one improbable kill. He had counted the seconds himself. Verification began immediately. Drone footage, rangefinders, after-action reports, all were pulled together. Within days, higher command had confirmation Ramirez had made the longest confirmed shot in theater. The number alone sent shockwaves through circles that normally kept to themselves. Messages arrived encrypted, analysts wanted details, and whispers traveled faster than orders. History had been made, but history was rarely kind to those it touched. Caldwell sought her out after the paperwork avalanche hit. He found her again at the maintenance shed, oiling the rifle with the same care as if nothing had changed. "They're going to turn this into a spectacle," he said. Her hands didn't pause. "Let them. It won't change what's next. What's next is more complicated," he countered. "They'll want to parade you, debrief you, maybe even pull you from the line. The record makes you visible, and visibility is dangerous." She set the cloth down, finally meeting his gaze. "Dangerous for me or for the missions?" "Both," he admitted. In the days that followed, Caldwell's team prepared for another operation, but the energy was different. Soldiers looked at Ramirez with awe or suspicion. Some wanted to train under her, others treated her like an omen. She remained composed, offering no explanation, carrying herself the same way she had before. It was that consistency that kept the SEALs grounded. They had seen her work. They didn't need the legend. They had lived the reality. Then came the call for their most delicate assignment yet. Intelligence indicated that a high-ranking insurgent leader was planning to slip through the mountains to regroup fighters scattered by recent losses. He would be exposed for only minutes during a meeting with couriers in a valley settlement. Airstrikes were impossible due to civilian presence. It had to be surgical. The team studied maps under dim light, tension palpable. Caldwell laid out the options, none of them clean. Finally, he turned to Ramirez. "Could you take it?" She scanned the charts. "Distance will be extreme, conditions unstable." But yes, her answer carried no bravado, only a commitment to try. Caldwell nodded. The decision was made. They moved out under moonlight, trekking ridgelines that seemed to stretch forever. The air was thin, every breath cutting like glass. Sofia carried the Barrett without complaint, her stride steady despite the weight. When they reached the observation point, dawn painted the valley in pale hues. Through scopes, they saw the village stirring, smoke curling from chimneys, figures moving between mud-brick walls. Hours of waiting followed, nerves stretched taut. Finally, the target appeared, stepping into an open courtyard with guards at his side. Caldwell whispered into comms, "Window is short. Can you make it?" Sofia was already calculating, murmuring numbers under her breath. Wind shifted, flags flapped in the village, children darted past. She steadied herself, exhaled, and squeezed. The rifle cracked like thunder across the peaks. They counted the seconds, long, agonizing. The figure stumbled, dropped. Guards erupted in confusion, shouts echoing. The shot had landed. The team exfiltrated swiftly, slipping through gullies as fighters scrambled without direction. By the time helicopters pulled them out, the village had descended into chaos. The leader was gone, and with him, a network of planned strikes. Back at base, Caldwell knew the kill would be folded into the growing legend. Ramirez said little, logging details with the same careful notes. Yet Caldwell saw the flicker in her expression, the awareness that each pull of the trigger carved deeper into her anonymity. She was no longer a soldier lost in files. She was becoming a name, one that history would not let go. Colonel Doyle summoned both of them. Her voice was heavy. Headquarters has verified both shots. The record stands. They're requesting Ramirez for stateside debriefs. Publicly, she'll be untouchable. Privately, you and I know it puts her in danger. Caldwell bristled. She's needed here. Pulling her now destabilizes everything. Doyle's eyes were tired. Orders are orders. But there's time. One more mission, maybe two, before they come for her. Use it. Outside, Caldwell confronted Ramirez. "You heard." They'll drag you into rooms where you'll never see daylight again. That's not what you want." She looked at him, eyes unwavering. "What I want stopped mattering when I squeezed that trigger. What matters now is finishing what's left before they take me off the field." Her resolve was chilling in its clarity. Caldwell knew he couldn't argue. He could only ensure those final missions counted. The next weeks blurred into operations that pushed them further than before. Sofia provided overwatch on raids deep in enemy territory, her calls guiding movements like a conductor leading an orchestra. She anticipated flanks before they formed, silenced threats before they grew. Each success deepened the reliance on her, and each success etched her legend further. But the final mission came sooner than Caldwell hoped. Intelligence flagged another meeting, higher value than any before, a coalition of insurgent leaders gathering at a hidden compound. The risk of striking them all at once was too valuable to pass. Caldwell's team was tasked with support, Sofia with the shot that would collapse the meeting before it began. They climbed again, higher than ever, lungs burning, legs aching. The observation point lay on a precarious ridge with sheer drops on 3 sides. Sofia set up, adjusting her scope with meticulous care. Caldwell lay beside her, spotting. He had never felt tension so sharp. Through the scope, the compound came into view. Figures moved in and out, guards posted. Then, one by one, leaders arrived, gathering in the courtyard. Sofia adjusted, logged wind, measured mirage. "This is it," she whispered. Caldwell nodded, voice low. "We trust you." She fired. The sound rolled through the mountains, a roar that seemed endless. Seconds stretched as the bullet crossed air. Then, impact. One man down, chaos erupting. Before guards could respond, she shifted, fired again. Another fell. A third shot, and the courtyard dissolved into panic. Fighters scattered, the meeting broken. Leadership decapitated in seconds. The SEALs withdrew under fire, enemy fighters spraying wildly at ridges they could not reach. Sofia packed the rifle, calm even as bullets ricocheted near. They slipped into gullies, evading pursuit until helicopters finally lifted them out. At base, the weight of the mission settled. They had struck a blow that would echo across the region. But Caldwell's satisfaction was muted. He knew this was the end. Headquarters would not wait longer. That night, he found Sofia by the wire again, staring at the mountains. "They'll come for you tomorrow," he said. She didn't turn. "I know. The file will open, the name will spread. But the men we saved will keep breathing. That's enough." He stood beside her in silence. For all his years, he had rarely felt humbled the way he did then. She was a soldier who asked for nothing, who carried everything, and who would soon lose the shadows she needed. The next morning, transport arrived. Officers stepped out, papers in hand. Sofia packed her gear without ceremony, slung the Barrett over her shoulder one last time. She looked at Caldwell as she passed. "Take care of them, that's all that matters." He nodded, unable to answer. The vehicle pulled away, dust rising. Caldwell stood watching until it vanished, the mountains swallowing the sound. He knew he had witnessed the making of a legend, but also the exile of a soldier who never wanted it. Later, when reports reached him, confirmations, headlines, whispers in corridors, he ignored them. For him, Ramirez was not a record, not a myth. She was the calm voice on comms, the steady hands cleaning a rifle at dawn, the presence on the ridge when death closed in. The world might remember her as a number, a feat of range. He remembered her as the wall that stood when everything else threatened to collapse. History would etch her name. Caldwell carried her truth, and somewhere, he hoped, Sofia Ramirez found peace beyond the scope. The dust of Coral Valley lingered long after Sofia Ramirez was taken from the mountains. For weeks, men who had fought under her silent watch repeated fragments of her presence. the stillness before each thunderous crack, the way her voice steadied them when chaos threatened to pull them apart. Around campfires and in barracks, they spoke not only of her record shots, but of the calm discipline that carried them through storms. Caldwell, listening from the edges, knew the truth behind the stories. They were not exaggerations, they were lived moments, stitched into the fabric of their survival. Her departure left a space in the unit that no equipment could fill. The ridges felt emptier without the unseen guardian who had read the battlefield like scripture. Patrols continued, convoys rolled, missions launched. But every man remembered the figure who had lain prone above them, catching enemies in the instant before disaster. Caldwell carried her presence with him, an invisible ally even in her absence. In private, he reflected on the nature of legends. Heroes were not born in the glow of recognition. They were forged in silence, in decisions made with no audience, no applause. Sofia had become a legend against her will, her anonymity sacrificed to the weight of history. The world would frame her as the marksman who set a record that bent belief. Caldwell, and those who had survived because of her, remembered something else, a soldier who bore her duty without complaint, who asked for nothing but the chance to protect. For the younger soldiers, her story became a compass. They trained harder, shot longer, listened more intently during briefings. Some copied the way she logged variables in notebooks, filling pages with wind patterns and distances, though they lacked her gift for intuition. Others simply carried the memory of her composure, a reminder that fear could be managed, precision demanded discipline, and courage sometimes came in the form of stillness rather than noise. Caldwell found himself haunted less by the shot itself than by the quiet moments he had shared with her. The way she wiped down her rifle in the dim glow of dawn, the rare flicker of weariness in her eyes, the words she left him with before stepping into the transport, "Take care of them, that's all that matters." He repeated those words often, using them as anchor and command, a directive that outlived her presence. When reports from higher command filtered back, laden with bureaucratic pride, Caldwell skimmed them without care. Numbers, distances, signatures, these were the details headquarters obsessed over. They missed the truth that mattered. A number on a report could not capture the way Sofia steadied a battlefield with her voice, or the way her precision cut chaos into order. They could not capture the human element of her legend. For Caldwell, the legacy was not in the kill count or the record. It was in the conviction she carried, the invisible thread that held men together in the dark. And it was in the cost she bore willingly, knowing that recognition would strip away the anonymity she valued. She had chosen to act anyway, and that choice was the essence of her greatness. Time moved forward. Missions continued. New names appeared on rosters, fresh faces arrived with eagerness in their eyes. Yet Caldwell knew the shadow of Sofia Ramirez would always stretch across those mountains, an unseen line of defense. He hoped she had found peace, away from the echoes of rifle fire, though he suspected her heart would never be free of the ridges. And so the tale closes, not with triumph shouted from rooftops, but with silence, the kind of silence that filled the spaces between her shots, heavy with meaning, profound in its weight. In that silence lies her true record, the unspoken measure of what she gave and what she left behind. Now to you, the one watching this story unfold here on VeteranBiker. You've walked with us through the ridges of Spingar, through the chaos of Shamal Gorge, through the impossible distance of Coral Valley. You've witnessed the courage of a soldier who asked for nothing but carried everything. And you've seen how legends are born not from fame but from sacrifice. As you reflect on Sofia's journey, ask yourself, what does courage mean to you? Is it the single perfect shot? Or is it the quiet resolve to do your duty when no one else is watching? We want to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments. Tell us how her story resonates with your own challenges, your own battles, whether on the battlefield, in your community, or in your life. If you felt the weight of her journey, if the silence before her shots spoke to you, then stay with us. Subscribe to VeteranBiker for more stories of grit, discipline, and humanity behind the uniform. Like this video to help others find it. And don't forget to let us know where you're watching from. We read every comment, and your words drive the mission forward. More stories wait on the horizon. Tales of men and women who stood firm when the world shook. Those videos are already queued up, appearing now at the end of your screen. Click, watch, continue the journey, because legends are not just names in reports, they're reminders of what we carry and what we can become. This is VeteranBiker. Thank you for walking with us. Until next time, stay sharp, stay steady, and never forget the truth carried in silence.